All right, thank you guys for letting me come out. I really appreciate it. I wrote a book called California's Next Century. Just put this here, kind of shows the image. It's available at Amazon and Kindle for $3 and about $20 for the print version. It's thick. Anyways, the reason that I talked to Pedro about coming to speak here is I thought it would be applicable to the goals of this group. So, as I understand it, the Californians for Justice are trying to improve schools and real education, particularly for minority students, and help out immigration. My book talks about the same thing. My book talks about improving public schools, changing the way that California thinks about immigrants, immigration, minorities, and the world economy all at the same time. And what I want to do is I want to remove the discussion about, we should tolerate diversity out of the kindness of our hearts, to we should appreciate the fact that we're the most diverse. Does that mean? No, sorry. We should appreciate the fact that we are the most diverse land, place, people, area in the entire planet. That's what my research goes into. I look at a bunch of countries and basically it comes down to California's #1, especially with the particular type of diversity. So here's how we can get improved public funding, we can improve the role of minorities, improve the role of immigrants, and improve world peace. Tall order, I know, but I encourage everybody to check out KC24. I just did an interview with them. Also, if you go to Amazon, I have 20 comments. Some of them include comments by business executives and foreign policy scholars. So there is something to this. Additionally, I got a good review from LA Daily, and I did a television interview for the July 4th weekend. I'm going to come from the top down, explain how all these wonderful things can happen, and I expect it to be seen impossible and can't happen. That's fine. So, in the next 20 years, guaranteed, there's going to be new superpowers with as much money and power and raw influence as America. America will no longer be the #1 and only superpower. It's going to be one of 7. Russia, China, India, Brazil, a Southeast Asian collective known as ASEAN, in addition to America and the EU, will be the new family of superpowers. So America in 20 years is going to be in a situation where it's not in a position to dictate terms to anybody. It can't force smaller countries to do anything. It's going to now have to bargain and act like a partner and sell other countries on the virtue of its own idea. Anybody see the Edward Snowden news recently, the guy, the NSA leaker? He went to Hong Kong. The president called the Chinese and said, with the full backing of the federal government, I demand that you hand him over. The Chinese just didn't even pick up the phone. Then they shipped him to Russia. Then the president says to the president of Russia, I demand, national security, you hand him over. Putin just shined him on. President of Russia said, no, not going to do it. What are you going to do about it? He even issued a letter to the business community saying, look, I'm going to not do whatever America says, but this has nothing to do with money and everything. And didn't do anything. This is an example of what's going to happen in the next 20 years. America will not be in the position to tell people what to do, force them to do things. It's going to have to sell things and win the hearts and minds of different nations. Going to happen. But you won't see any American politician talking about this because they don't want to talk about the future that we're going to. Here's what happened. Everybody remember the fall of the Berlin Wall, 1985, and communism ended? Well, for most of the last century, since World War II, the world was basically capitalism, democracy, and communism. And then that all ended about 1985, 1990. And everybody who was communist or toying around with communism is now capitalist. Cuba and North Korea actually have black market capitalist economies. China's only communist in name. So as these people move from communism to capitalism, they're going to become as rich and powerful as America. Basically, if you have a population as big as America or bigger, your economy will be larger than America's. How many of you are aware that Europe is already richer than America today? Exactly. How many of you believe any American knows that? Most Americans completely ignorant that the EU is actually wealthier than America. We're able to hold on to power because of our military strength. We're able to have that military strength because we have a giant GDP and we can spend a small fraction of it. But when China, India, Brazil, Russia, and Southeast Asia get to have as big an economy as America, they too can only slice off 5 to 10% of their GDP and have just as big an army. China's already working on doing that. How many of you are aware that China has patrols going off the coast of America now, right off on international waters? And America is not in a position to do anything about it. How many of you are aware that China is actively telling India and the rest of Southeast Asia what islands they can go to and how close they can get to the Chinese borders? They're already doing that. But it gets worse. So as these countries become big and they realize they can challenge America, they're challenging the institutions that America built. So world peace has been, since World War II, held at the UN, something called the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. Now there's a new group called the G20, the gang of the top 20 countries. China, India, Russia, Brazil, and Southeast Asia view all of these institutions as bogus. They feel that the UN was built by America and Europe in order to hold American and European power. And there's something to that. You know, the World Bank, it's called the World Bank. That means anybody can take out a loan there. They have never had a president who wasn't American or European for 70 years. So now they're trying to tell the Chinese, the Russians, the Brazilians, the Southeast Asians, oh, the World Bank's about you. The Chinese aren't buying it. They said, you want to include us now that we have as much money as you? Where were you the last century? How come we weren't involved? So now what they're doing is, as these countries become rich and powerful, they're making their own UN, their own World Bank, their own G20. And they're specifically banning America from being part of it. Who's heard of Mercosur? Yeah. Brazil has a UN-type organization of their own. All of Latin America belongs to it. It's called Mercosur, M-E-R-C-O-S-U-R. So, who's aware of NAFTA? NAFTA? Right, okay. America wanted to expand NAFTA with something called the FTAA, Free Trade Agreement of the Americas. It was just going to expand NAFTA from Mexico all the way down. Brazil told all of the Latin American countries who were part of Mercosur, you're not going to sign that deal, or it's going to upset Brazil. Brazil forced Latin America to not back up America's plan, and America was knocked out of that trade agreement, and America's permanently banned from being part of Mercosur. How many of you heard that story? America was trumped. It went to Latin America, it said, here's the trade deal. Brazil said, I'm more powerful here. So these people are going to listen to what I want. And that's exactly what happened. But we don't talk about that in America. Russia's moving this way, India's moving this way. So America gave India a bunch of nuclear technology when George W. Bush was president, and they were hoping the Indians would buy a bunch of military equipment. The Indians took the nuclear power technology from America and then spent all their money on Russian jets and planes. And when America went to India and complained, the Indians said, what are you going to do about it? You can't tell us what to do anymore. That's not the way things work anymore. And as things progress in the next 20 years, it's only going to get worse. You're going to see more Edward Snowden type things. So we're entering into a period where America cannot dictate terms. It's going to be one of a bunch of equals, and it gets worse. George W. Bush ruined America's opinion in the world, completely. Barack Obama has not improved it at all. Not my opinion, I have it documented in the book, multiple international, what's called PEW surveys. Obama's actually hated more in certain parts of Africa and Latin America than George W. Bush. Not my opinion, fully documented. The point of that is to say that we're approaching a 15-year period where America is the most hated country and has been stayed as the most hated country. Right as we enter a period where America's one of equals. So now there's going to be 7 superpowers. This guy's hated by everybody. By the way, everybody makes international trade as the main way they make money at all. How many of you are aware that foreign companies are buying less American goods because they're pissed off at America? How many of you are aware? It's called foreign direct investment, FDI. We've lost it by 30% when George W. Bush, it has not come back up. That's a third of foreign investment in this country gone. And that does not have to do with the recession, because foreign countries are investing in Europe and China. They're pissed off. And that has a real effect on their pocketbook. You sell a product, but Brazil sells a product. Brazil didn't piss me off, so I'm going to buy from them. You sell a product, but Russia sells a product. I'm going to buy from Russia, because I can, it's just as good. I don't have to do that. What are you going to do? You can't control me. You can't tell me what's going to happen at the UN. You can't buy votes. You can't make trade blocks anymore. You're not in that position. You're the victim of your own success. You wanted to defeat communism, you did. Now everybody's capitalist, so you can't dictate to them about the world order. And so, 7 superpowers, America's not liked, international trade's going up, and each one's making their own UN. China's the best example. Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO. That's China's answer to Brazil's Mercosur. When China started the SCO in '95, they had 2 nations. Now they have about 30. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization does the exact same thing that the UN does. So China's now getting to the point where they can say, you know, UN, you want to talk about this? We already had our own agreement, we're just going to ignore that. Multiple foreign policy scholars that I have documented, not my opinion, are saying that this is what happens and is extremely dangerous because it's the lead up to World War III, their prediction. Here's why. Go back to right up before World War I. There were countries that were poor and were becoming rich. Their names were Germany, Japan, and Italy. And for a while they took the lead from England and France. But when Germany, Italy, and Japan became as rich as England and France, they left this thing called the League of Nations, which is our modern UN. Next thing you know, you have trade wars. You can't buy my good, I'm not going to sell it to you. And then the next thing you know, you have World War I and World War II. American foreign policy scholars are saying China, Russia, Brazil coming up and making their own UNs and not going to the main UN is exactly what happened right up to World War I. You let these trends continue, you're going to start to see trade wars where we don't buy your product and you can't sell your product in our country. That happens right before people start shooting and shooting missiles at each other. So, here's where California comes in. About 200 years ago, the first diplomatic center was a little city called Geneva in a country called Switzerland. Everybody heard of the Geneva Conventions? You look up shipping agreements, the first business agreements, the first telephone agreements, they all happen in Geneva, Switzerland. Here's why. In the 1800s, when Europe ran the entire world and colonized all of Africa and Latin America, I'm not saying good or bad, I'm just saying was, the Swiss, who are part German, French, and Italian, picked up English and went to the other European countries. And they said, you European countries are fighting over territory. You need to talk, you need to have peace and agreements. We Swiss speak German, French, Italian, and know all your cultures. And we're the living embodiment of all you people getting along and talking. That worked. And so about 200 years ago, Switzerland, Geneva, became the negotiation center for Europe. 2 years ago, the Swiss said they can no longer be the negotiation center. They've issued 2 official reports because the world's not going to be owned by Caucasian people. So the rest of the world doesn't want a center of negotiation that's in Europe or America because these centers never included Russians, Chinese, Brazilians, Southeast Asians, Africans, or Latinos. I propose that California become the new negotiation center for the next century because we and we alone have the unique diversity for the new century superpowers the way Switzerland did in the last century. And if we do that, we can have that economy. There's a gap emerging in the market. People are going to less Switzerland meetings. They're going to less UN meetings. They're making their own. We jump in the market. We bring the partners together. We get all the money. By the way, everybody thinks Switzerland's economy based on gold. That's only 25%, 65% of the economy is based upon diplomatic negotiation services. So we can have that. And what I'm saying is that we could have effectively another tech boom here in California. And the great thing about this is that if we're a negotiation center, then we have to change the way that we think about people who speak other languages, who recently came from another country, who invite their friends and cousins to move in here. We have to start appreciating all those people as direct economic lifelines. You would have to see immigrants as the gold that makes California run if we do this. And that moves the debate on immigration and minorities to everybody in California viewing it as something that affects their personal wallet. You will have a better debate and more acceptance of immigrants and minorities and all of those diversity issues if we make that link. We get the money goes to schools, and the debate on how everybody's treated, and diversity in particular, changes forever. Thank you, and I'll stop there.